Hey everyone, it's Paul from Alexander Knife Sharpen Laser Engraving. So recently, one of the followers asked me if I would show my process that I'm currently using for refinishing wood handles. This is an easy upsell to your client. So my client came in to get this sharpened. I asked them, hey, would you like the handle refinished? And I charge $5 for that to just refinish this handle. And I'll show you how I do it. It's a relatively quick process. I start with radial discs, the inexpensive ones, the Chinese ones, the 80 grits. So here it is. Oh, sorry, this is the blue one. This is a 400 grit. I want the 80. Now, I used to sand these, and I still do, but one of the things I found with sanding is you get a lot of like junk that basically ruins the sandpaper right away. When the old finish starts to come off, it kind of gums up the sandpaper. Rather than going through a whole bunch of sandpaper, because if I started doing this, it would gum this up relatively quickly. I always start now with these, with the green 80 grit dental abrasives. Now I'll put my mask on here real quick and just show you how quick this will strip this down, and then we'll go on to the other part. Okay, so now you can see I got most of that old finish off, and now I'll hit it with my sander real quick. But for some amazing reason, it doesn't gum up radial discs. But if I did that with just the sander, this would get all gummed up in a very short period of time. And this is usually 250. Yeah, and that's what it is, 250. So now I'll just quickly touch up this whole knife. But if I had just done this, I'd probably had to change this pad 3 or 4 times. And let me show you what I was talking about. So you see this gummy stuff, and I've showed before how I cut these myself. It's a lot less expensive than buying the Milwaukee pads. These are very inexpensive if I cut them myself. But this stuff here, if I had started with this would have been filled up in like 2 seconds, and I would have had a ton of sanding still to do. But by starting with the dental abrasive, I just don't get any of that. So now all I'm going to do is wipe off those rivets. So now I'll just look for anything that I might want to hit a little bit harder just in case. I see a little burn mark here where they must have burned this handle. I'm going to touch that a little bit more with the 80. See if I can get that burn mark out. There we go. It's coming. This is a pretty deep burn mark. That looks a little better. I'm going to hit the sander one more time. And that looks pretty good to me. I usually spray it with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and wipe it down. It also helps bring out some of the grain. So I'll just find a clean spot of rag, a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. This will also give you a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like after you treat it with the oil. And it gives you a chance to look at it real quick what it's probably going to look like. But then the oil, the alcohol dries really fast. It does clean off some of any other gunk that's left on there, but it kind of gives you a nice idea of what it's going to look like. And then you'll see it kind of dries and go flat. And I'm happy with that. That's going to look real nice. All right, so now we're going to go into a vacuum chamber after we treat it with oil. So we're going to use our new vacuum chamber. You guys have seen my old one before. I just picked this one up the other day. It's been, it's great. It's nice and big. This was one of my Black Friday purchases. Let me take this mask off. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So one thing I like to do if I'm going to use hardening oil, I like to take a little piece of painter's tape and just put it right across this part of the knife on both sides. Because the hardening oil, as it dries, I don't want to have to fight with any of it to get it off the blade. So I find just by putting a little bit of painter's tape there, keeps it from me getting it on that part of the blade. The other thing I like to do sometimes is put a piece on it where I can grab it. So there we go. My other vacuum chamber, I always keep kind of a paper towel on the bottom in case the oil drips. This is actually designed to let air through it. I'm just going to throw that in there in the bottom. Grab my knife, put a good glob of Danish oil on there. And I want to get it in all these areas where we want it to go. So what the vacuum chamber does is it sucks the air out of the wood and lets the oil get in faster all the way into the wood, so it helps it penetrate it. It's not going to dry while it's in the vacuum chamber. It's just going to help it get in there. Because of the lack of air, it actually won't dry while it's sitting in there. Even if you forget it for a while, which I've done plenty of times, you don't have to worry about it drying before you wanted it, because it just isn't going to dry in an environment with no oxygen. You're just giving it a better time to penetrate that wood. So once I have it all on there, like I like, I'm going to actually, let's see if I can turn this upside down somehow. I want you guys to see I know what I'll do. Let's use one of my magnets. Since this is a nice big chamber, yeah, this will work. Since this is such a big chamber, I can put one of my on-off magnets in here to help it stand up and hopefully stay right here in the middle. Yeah, that's working great. I like that. All right, let me just peel my glove off. We'll put the lid on. I'm going to bring the camera down here close so you can see what happens. I'm just going to lay that right on the top. All right, I'm starting my vacuum chamber pump. I am turning on the vacuum, so let me back out here a little bit just to show you. The first thing you're going to do, we're going to shut this valve here, and we're going to leave this one open, and this will allow it to suck the air out of the chamber. And then when we want it to stop, once we've reached full pressure, then we'll shut this valve off and then shut the machine off. If this thing was full of liquid, you always shut the valve and then the machine. But since we don't have liquid in there, it really doesn't matter even if we shut the machine first. But if you ever had a liquid in it and you're doing it, you always shut the valve off first because you don't want it to backflow into the machine. The pump going. Now my other chamber is a lot smaller and skinnier, so it pretty quickly starts going up in pressure. This is a pretty big chamber, but we also need to make sure we have a good seal on there. I don't feel like we do. Here, let me make sure we got a good seal. There we go. Sometimes just pushing down a tiny bit like I did there, you'll see that it grabbed the seal. So if it's going and it's not moving, just put a little weight down there and it'll usually grab the rubber. And you can see. All right, so since you can see that, I'm going to show you what's going on with the knife. See little air bubbles? So it's literally pulling the air out of the handle, which allows the oil then to penetrate and go in as all the air bubbles come out and pop. And you can submerge it. I have done that before too. You know, like I've taken a knife and put a jar in there with linseed oil in it and submerged the whole thing in there. You do have to watch it if you do it that way and make sure that you don't overflow the jar. The other thing is it takes a long time to dry. So just understand that it's not going to dry as quickly. I find this process works really great. The handles look great. Since they're old, they're already stabilized. So this is just helping the hardening oil get in there a little quicker since we stripped off, you know, kind of the surface level of it. We're not quite at full pressure, but we're really close. And you'll see eventually the bubbles will stop coming out. And that's when you know it's gotten all the air out of the chamber and of the handle. And we're going to just leave that in there for about a half hour. We're really close to full pressure. So really close. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shut this valve and then shut off the motor. And that should hold its pressure the whole time. I mean, for days, literally. If you know, as long as everything's right, if it's ever not holding its pressure, you want to check all your connections and find out why your vacuum chamber is not holding pressure, because it should be. We're still getting a lot of little bubbles on that knife all the way down. And as they pop and let the air come out of that handle, it helps that oil just penetrate. All right, so we'll come back in about 20 minutes. And then what we'll do is we just take this out. We will wipe it off and then we'll hang it to dry. And I'll show you how I do that. Hi, kitty. Okay, I got interrupted by a couple things. So it's been over an hour and a half, but I'll show you what I said before about how the knife will not fully dry until it is in a full oxygen environment. So I'm releasing all the pressure from the vacuum chamber. All right, it's all out. So now I can take the lid off. And there's our knife. You can see it's still, everything's wet. Now it did run a little bit down the knife blade, so I'm going to wipe that off. Okay, now what I like to do is I use a shop towel, and I'll just wipe off all the excess. Just get a little wipe. No big deal. You don't have to get every single speck of it. But you can already see how nice that's going to look. Let's see. Looks good, right? Doesn't even look like the same handle at all. In my shop, there's a couple places where I have magnets. And this is one of them up here. I used to do it on an old bench with some zip ties, but I have upgraded since then. Now I just come up and I hang my knife on a kitchen magnet. And I will let that just sit there and dry. The good thing with Danish oil is it's actually polymerized linseed oil and it dries relatively fast. So in an hour, that will be totally dry and able to be touched and handled. It will take a couple days for it to fully harden inside of the knife, but within an hour, it'll be doing really well. And you can then just leave it alone, or the other option is, if you have time, if you have it for enough time, if your client doesn't come back right away, you can even polish it a little bit on the buffer after, but you want to give it definitely time to be dry before you do any buffer polishing. But that's what I do. That's my method for treating handles. It's worked out really well. The clients really love it. The handles look great when they're all done. I really like this new vacuum chamber because I can fit several knives in there. So let me show you my old vacuum chamber. Was this one. right next to it. These were the same, almost the same height. My old vacuum chamber is maybe an inch taller, but as you can see, it's a lot less wide. So I could really only fit one knife in here. So I'm really loving this one because I could probably just about put a whole set of knives in there and do the same process you just saw here. And what's really awesome is this whole thing, I got it on a Black Friday sale. It was like $160. I think its normal price is like $180. I paid over $285 just for this vacuum chamber here. So this is a great deal on a vacuum chamber, and it included the pump. So when I paid $285 for this, it didn't even include the pump. I still had to buy a pump. So this is just a fantastic deal, and it's made by the same company that made my pump. So now I have two pumps because, as you can see, I got in on this same deal when I saw this vacuum chamber on sale for Black Friday. I decided to pick up another one. What's great about this, like I said, you can fit multiple knives in there at one time. And using an on-off magnet, you can see you can even have the knife stand straight up in the middle, which is another pretty cool use for our on-off magnets. That's my method for refinishing wood handles. So that's it for now. I will put links to this vacuum chamber in there and the magnetic bars. I'll show you one other magnetic bar. I have more than one in my shop. I also have one here. So this is a little different one, but it's right on the side of my workbench. And the other reason I put those in is just for safety. A lot of times in the shop, and the reason I have the one over here by my computer is sometimes I'll be working on something and have to come over to the computer, and it gives me a nice safe spot to put a knife. If I'm currently working on one, I will just slap it up there, and that also keeps me from misplacing them when I come over to the computer. I've been trying to get in the habit of, if there's a knife that I'm currently working on, I just put it up there on the magnetic holder. Right, so this knife has been sitting overnight drying, and let me just show you the finished wood here, and you can see just how much better that looks. It just came out great. Now, the one thing you can do if you want to, you don't have to do it, but you can, if you want to, you can polish it a little bit on a buffer. I always love these jewelry buffers, and I'll show you just kind of quickly how I do that. And this is also something you can do if you're not completely refinishing a wood handle. I do have other videos on this. I've shown how I will buff them up a little bit just to make everything go back looking a little nice. This works great on wood handles and plastic handles. Let me show you that. We'll just add this in here at the end of this video for everybody. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of this tape that I put on there just to protect from the oil getting on the knife where I may not want it on there and then have to take any hardening oil off of there. So just peel that off, and this is where I put it on just so I had a place to grab it. I haven't even sharpened this yet. Like I said, this is just working on the handle to give it a really nice finish and look. You can see we need to take this part down there because they've been sharpening this, and obviously don't have a way to bring that bolster area down any. It's not really a true like normal fat bolster, but that needs to come down some. All right, so here's what I like to do when it comes to polishing. I like to use either a medium or a fine. Generally I use the medium buffs, these yellow ones that come with my jewelry buffers. These are in the links to my store where I keep all the links of all the different things that I use. These are 4-inch ones. This one's starting to get pretty worn down there. It's probably about 3.5 now. You should clean it every so often. So to clean it, you want to hit it with what we call a rake. Normally I would turn this on so it sucks the dust in. This is probably the messiest thing I do in my shop, is raking out a buffer pad. And you'll see it takes all the old gunk off. Also highly recommend that you wear a mask when you do that. It does throw little fibers all over the place. I should have one on. Shame on me. So here's my one of my favorite plastic polishes. I'll put a link to this in there. This thing is going on probably 4 years old, and it's still going. It doesn't take a whole lot. You just touch a little bit to the buff. Now, the other reason I love jewelry polishers is especially for plastic handles. For wood ones, not that big of a deal, but I do like to, still touch these. You always want to keep it moving, but you'll see it'll give this a beautiful shine and buff this up. And you can do this even without doing that whole process that I just did of the hardening oil. If you just want to make a wood handle look better, you can buff it with this polish here that I showed you. It works great on both plastic and wood. I have another one from Combat Industries that I like too. This one will definitely last me like probably 4 lifetimes. It is so huge. I will never go through all of that. But I like this one a whole lot, and I've been using that. It actually came as a 2-pack. I haven't even touched the second one. It's still in its box. Just to show you, it just puts a really nice polish on there. And that's all you have to do. And the other reason I love these as opposed to full-size buffers, and I will warn you about this right up front. If you use a full-size buffer on a plastic handle, you can burn them and you can even melt them. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't happen with these jewelry buffers, and that's the other reason why I love them. So this is a handle that I'm doing some repairs to. I did some epoxy fixes in here. This chunk broke out for this customer. I used some Blade Bond and glued it back in. And I'm going to hit this more with even the dental abrasives. But what I do with these often is same thing, same plastic, wood or polish. It works on both. I'll just put it on there and I'll just get in here and I will buff this up. But what I love about these little jewelry buffers is I have never had one melt plastic. But I have had full-size buffers at full speed, even full-size. I've even tried full-size buffers on a low-speed buffer and had them burn a plastic handle. I've never had it happen with the jewelry buffers. One, because they have full variable speed control, but for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just the torque, the RPMs, it just doesn't melt a handle on me. Now you got to be conscious to always keep moving. But I just want to show you, it just does a beautiful job of repolishing this handle. I'm going to hit this again with some dental abrasives and stuff to bring down some of these areas where I put epoxy in. Just does a great job. Let me grab another knife and let's see if I got something here that I can show you how well it does. Okay, so here's a pretty good example. I had someone who brought in a set of shoes, and you can see this one's starting to dull a little bit. It doesn't look great. This is something you wouldn't necessarily have to retreat with linseed oil and stuff like that. Just buffing it with wood polish on a jewelry buffer does a great job on these shoes. And again, same thing. It's just something I'm going to quickly get in here and just buff this up. And when you're talking these polishes, you can actually go both directions. You don't always have to go with the wood grain. It's such a fine polish. Go in both directions actually gives you a really nice kind of glassy look to it. Let's see, can you guys see how much nicer and shinier that is already? And that's all it takes, maybe a minute to really make one of these handles just look fantastic. And just another great use for these jewelry buffers, and a really safe way to work on handles without damaging them or burning them or melting them. And it just does a great job. Let me see here. I got a couple more sets of knives that came in. Let me see if I got anything else here that might benefit. Oh, okay, great. We got a shoon that's really dull. Yeah, both of these will be a good example. So look at this. Look how dull this shoon is. Okay, you can see it just, there's no luster there. It's oxidized. But let me just show you what this will do for this handle. So like I said, you don't have to necessarily, do the whole vacuum chamber process. If you just want to have a great thing that you can do to return knives and do something that not every sharpener out there is doing. The guy at the farmer's market is probably not doing this. Just touch your customers' knives, handles quickly on a jewelry buffer, and you'll be amazed at how nice they look. Main thing here, we keep moving. But like I said, with the jewelry buffers, it's not a huge deal. If you see your buff getting dirty, because sometimes it will, if you see this starting to get black, use a buffer rake on it and just clean that off. And you can even use this, you can use it on metal, even though it says it's for wood, where the metal is up top here. I do find that the radial discs work far better for polishing up that area. So I usually always do that on these. And this one could really use something even more aggressive. It's really oxidized. I'm just going to come in here and just touch that area real quick. And I usually like to hit the end here, and a lot of times right around that edge. But when I do that, I also love to go back and then do that last bit of buffing again, just in case the wood area got touched at all. And now that oxidation's off too, usually that will really help polish up that metal. Yeah, and can you guys see that? I mean, it's just shiny and it just looks great. And then it doesn't hurt to give it a quick wipe. You might get a little black from the polish off, but I think you can see just how much nicer that looks already. From that dull, faded look from sitting in water and different things to now it's nice and shiny again. And I'll just give you one more example just to show you how great it looks. So this has been really well cared for, but again, this Wusthof is a little faded, and you could just touch it real quick. It will polish up the rivets. It will make that plastic a nice deeper, darker black again. It only takes a couple seconds and everything looks just great. That would be one of my tips for just kind of separating yourself if you want to be a little bit better service than a lot of the knife sharpening services that are out there. People are going to notice, and what did that take? A couple seconds? And you can see it just looks better. It's making the knife look like it's brand new again. And if you do that every once in a while, when the knives come in, they maintain that great look and they look like they're new, and your customers are going to notice it and they're going to keep coming back to you as opposed to, somebody else that doesn't return their stuff looking great. All right. So I'll leave links to all those things in the description of this video. And I hope that helps some of you out if you want to start getting into refinishing knife handles. It is a great way to have a nice little upsell on the knives that you sharpen. Like I said, that would have been $10. I simply asked her, would you like me to refinish the handle? She said, how much is that? I said, it's $5 extra. She said, absolutely. So now I made $15 on that knife instead of 10.